Welcome to the first official Unsheathed podcast. First one by that name, anyway. I'm Kyell Gold.
And this is K.M. Hirosaki, joining him from a discreet remote location.
It is so sad that we cannot be recording from the same room today.
I know, but thanks to the wonders of modern technology, not only do I get to be with you, but I also get to tease you and also the listeners with the possibility that I might not even be wearing pants right now, and none of you would be any the wiser.
Well, certainly may be the first time that's happened on our podcast.
Our whole 31 minutes of
I'm all
podcast at this
flustered now.
point. That's revenge for earlier.
Otters without pants. My goodness, they have to lay down. Is that what you meant by an icebreaker?
I think that qualifies. If it doesn't qualify, I'll feel really bad
Everyone's.
about myself.
Well, I think if everyone's not nice and relaxed, they're at least tense in the right kind of way to enjoy the podcast. So we've both been kind of busy this weekend. I've been working on a few stories and finishing up a trilogy I've been talking about, and I'm going to be hopefully sending some of it off to be reviewed for publication. And you've been working on some stuff too, I believe.
Yeah, I haven't been generating anything new lately, though. I've just been reviewing and editing and touching on things that won't see the light of day for some time. So this podcast is my chance to be relevant and current and not boring.
Yes, I can. People should understand in sort of the writing frame of mind that um, the editing is really a large part of the writing. I mean, it's not all scribbling down brilliant ideas in first drafts and writing new stories. It's going back over the old stories you've written and making them better, making them as good as you can. That's
You
a
know, I
lot of
was
what I've been doing
I,
the last couple of days too.
I was about to launch into a little discussion on that, but I realized that will be actually more relevant to something that we'll touch on later.
Yes. How's that for teasing the listeners? Now you have to stay till all the way to the end.
Now we have content.
We do. We had we had a number of letters from listeners, and so many that if we want to kind of keep to our nice compact time frame, we will have no time to read them all. So we selected a few that we thought would be interesting to talk about, and there were several actually that touched on do's and don'ts of writing, areas of exercise, and so forth. And I think that all we all decided that deserved a little podcast of its own. So that may be the next one.
Yeah, and there is one in particular where it's a really open-ended discussion that the question leads into, and thinking about it, I go, we could easily just talk about this for a half hour. So
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe you all will see that as its own thing at some point in the somewhat near future.
Yeah, well, certainly is worth it's worth discussion, and I love the practice of workshop and writing, and I think the more people that know how to do it, the more people are motivated to do it, the better off everyone is. So, I believe you were going to start with our first question.
Yes, I can do that. So the
These are,
first one
by the
here that
way, these are, by the way, not K.M. Hirosaki's not going to read just questions that were sent to him, and I'm not just going to read questions that were sent to me. We sort of pooled them all and then we review them. So no matter who you send them to, they get to both of us.
yeah, and we'll probably include more detailed contact information in either the show notes or wherever we happen to post about this next. There was apparently a bit of confusion on where to actually send questions to for this episode, but we can clear that up.
Hmm. Well, enough people figured it out that we have plenty to talk about.
We do. But so I will get right into the question. This one is from Xerxes Otter. So he asks, I know this is probably a stupid question. There are no stupid questions, by the way. But I'll ask anyway for the sake of getting an answer. and I hope it's not a stupid answer. I am a writer, not the best, but I do enjoy what I do. However, I never feel that my stories are good enough to post, no matter what others say about them. Atop that, no matter how much is written into a story, I feel that it's too short, too descriptive, or too long. Aside from my rambling, my question is this. If handwritten in a notebook with medium to small handwriting, how long do you think a story should be? If you're able to judge by that, then suppose it is typed in 12-point font in Microsoft Word. I'm trying to find a way to at least keep my stories long or short enough to stay entertaining and interesting when or if I do post them somewhere.
Well, this is something we get asked a lot, and in
It
fact,
does come up a lot.
in the um, writer's meme that was going around that I saw a few people respond to, they were talking about what length of story do you prefer to write. Um, so you go ahead and give your thoughts on this, and I think they're pretty much the same as mine.
So, the first thing here is about how long should a story be. The basic answer to that is as long as it needs to be. And that's going to depend on the story. Some stories warrant being longer, more descriptive works, and some stories are better off just being shorter pieces. There's no magic answer. And the difference between, your typical short story and your typical novel is that one of them takes more time and detail to tell than the other. Very rarely can you take a story that was in one form and easily switch it into another. So basically, the story dictates how long it has to be.
Yeah, that's my thought too. One of the things that I've heard and that I kind of hold to is that a short story is about a point in time. It's about an incident, a single moment, something that affects a change in a character. And a novel is about a character's journey. So they're both about change, but the novel gives you more of a sense of where you're coming from and where you're going to, and how the character gets there, as opposed to the short story, which just says it's kind of this was the moment where things changed. And I think that's why the sort of first love stories are so popular in the short form, because we all love that idea that there's a moment when you know that this is the right person for you, even if in practice it doesn't always work that way.
And people write a lot of songs about that too. It's a very common theme. I think that it resonates with certainly at least Western culture.
Oh yeah. Um, so it's when I start writing a story, sometimes the whole arc of the story is apparent at the beginning. Sometimes I'm just kind of writing to feel out how big of a story it is, but the pacing of the story from the beginning really tells you how long the story is going to be. If you're feeling like you need to put a lot of description and you need to be taking your time with how things happen, then it's going to be a longer story. If you feel like you get right into the action, you establish a character pretty quickly, you know who he is, and this is the story of someone who thought he would never fall in love again, and then how he met the person that changed his life forever. And you get right into, say, the blowjob
I think
technique.
I think I've read that story like 20 times.
Yes, often they already have their pants off, huh?
See,
So
now I'm
I
flustered.
think that's that.
Thanks. But yeah,
Well, I
what
figure if we can talk about blowjobs on every podcast, it'll keep our explicit tag up.
I don't think that'll be difficult to convince at least one of the two of us to be in the mood to talk about blowjobs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But no, to get back to what you were saying about getting a feel for how long a story is going to be, often even the writer can be caught off guard by that. Uh, my biggest example lately is earlier this year, I wrote a story called Pressure. I was expecting it to be a quick 5,000 word short story that I was just going to write just to have fun with. By the time I had gotten 1,000 words in, I was like, there's no way this is going to be that short a story. And it ended up being something like 18,000 words long, I think, in the end.
And that was a good story, too. You can find it on yifstar.com
Yes.
or for Affinity, I believe.
I don't know if that was on for Affinity, actually. I,
Maybe
I
not.
should post it, though. Now that I've. One of my readers gave me the suggestion of converting my stories to PDF format and then uploading the PDFs to For Affinity, which works a lot nicer.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion I'm going to save for a future time. I kind of prefer text, and I'll just say if you do upload your stories as PDF, that you should at least upload the first page as text so people can read it to start with. But I think we should move on. We spent more time discussing that question than we thought we were going to.
Well, it was a layered question. It's like
That's
we were
true.
talking about. Sometimes even the people going into it aren't aware of how long it's going to take.
And there's your object lesson for today.
Oh, actually, and I just want to really quickly address this one thing about how long is it going to be in a small notebook with medium small handwriting. That's not really something to really gauge story length. For
Hmm.
one, uh, writers and especially editors, the way that you want to think about, and like I was just talking now, you want to think about story length in word count and not page count, just because the how much fits on a page depends on what style of writing you're using, how much dialogue there is, what font, what margins, like all of that. There's no way that a page count is going to give you an accurate story length.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's done term papers in school and played with the margins to get a 4-page paper to fill a 5-page requirement knows that.
I've done that more times than I'd care to admit. My favorite trick was 2.5 spacing.
Uh-huh.
Because triple spaced was way too obvious, but if you did 2.5, you could sometimes sneak that by.
Let's not give away all our secrets.
I mean, I was diligent and did all of my work.
Sometimes it just wasn't long enough. So Pyro Stinger, our fellow published author from the anthology X, available from Sofa Wolf Press, writes in with a question. He says, all right, so you guys are writers. Have you ever dealt with the fear of the blank screen, and are there any tips for overcoming it? And this is another one that we get a lot.
Get a new hobby. That would be a way to to solve that problem.
Yes, there was a quote that I heard recently from, I want to say it was Emily Dickinson, maybe. It was either Emily Dickinson or Dorothy Parker, who said, the second best gift you can give a friend who wants to become a writer is a copy of Strunk and White's Elements of Style. And the first best gift is to shoot them now while they're still happy.
I think that was Dorothy Parker.
It does sound a little more like her.
Yeah,
Um,
that's oddly not depressing enough to sound like Emily Dickinson. I don't think.
so the fear of the blank screen. Well, I have in the past, and my tip for overcoming it is just write whatever comes into your head. Force yourself to put one word down on the screen, and then another, and just tell yourself this is just going to be a scratch document. It ain't going to last. I'm going to throw it away. I'm not even going to save it when I'm done. I'm just going to write some words, and I'm looking around the room and I see a window, so I'm going to write down, at the window, and then well, something's happening at the window. So what's happening at the window? And go look out your window and see what's happening. Out the window there was a tree and it was rustling in the breeze, and just keep doing that until your mind kicks in and says, okay, maybe someone's standing at the bottom of the tree and looking up at the leaves, and maybe they're standing at the bottom of the tree waiting for somebody, and well, who are they waiting for, and why are they waiting by the tree outside my window? Um, for my own case, the best remedy to deal with the fear of the blank screen is to never allow the screen to be blank. And the way to do that is to always be thinking about your stories when you're not sitting in front of the computer, so that when you do sit down and you have a blank screen, you already know what you're going to write.
That is excellent advice and something that busy people can probably accommodate fairly well. Where when finding time to write comes at a premium, you'd better use all that useless interim time to do the thinking so that the tiny bits of time that you can sit in front of a computer and actually type things out, you have things in your head already.
You have any tips of your own?
Yeah, so this is what I had alluded to earlier with my clever, clever foreshadowing, um, which wasn't so clever because it wasn't intentional. But again, to think in terms of drafting and just knowing that what you're doing isn't final, which sort of ties into what you were just saying. But especially lately, I've had several people, actually within the last week, say like, "Oh, I'm working on this story and it's not coming out the way I want it to." And every time I try to work on it, either nothing comes out or when it does come out, I don't like what it is. And just get yourself into the habit of thinking that whatever you're going to write down isn't going to be what you're going to put out there. Just write it down, see where it goes, and if it doesn't go where you want it to, go back and change it and start over. It's not the end of the world, and nobody's going to see what you don't let them see. So don't worry about being embarrassed by your own writing, because you're ultimately the person who decides when that gets to be seen by anyone other than you.
Yep. Well, that sounds good to me. Um, if anyone else out there has any tips for dealing with the dreaded blank screen, or writer's block even, send them in. And if we get some good ones, we'll read them in the next episode, or perhaps the one after that.
Depending on what we do.
Yes, depending on whether Hirosaki-san can put his pants back on.
You don't know if they're even off. I might have just been making that up.
Well, perhaps you can make up putting them back on then.
Well, if your pants aren't really off, I guess I'm not really giving you this blowjob.
Well, that sounds like the premise of a story, doesn't it?
I bet that I could, if I tried hard enough, I could find a way to make it hot.
I think if you start a story with the line, if your pants aren't really off, then I'm not really giving you this blowjob, I think that pretty much takes care of the hotness.
So, okay, Pyro, right there, your trick for like how to deal with a blank screen. Make that be your first line and go from there.
Yeah, we want to see that story
I'd,
now.
I'd actually want to see where he would take that because he's a I've liked all this of his stuff that I've read so far. He's got some pretty clever ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you could do something fun with it. Although he doesn't usually do the mail stuff, from what I've seen. But it doesn't have to be.
We could make that a requirement. We could make that part of the impetus to challenge him to fill those blank screens.
Well, I was going to say it doesn't have to be a boy giving the blowjob.
Can it be an androgynous robot fox that doesn't really have a gender?
Why does it have to be a fox?
Because usually you're asking why it has to be a fox and not why does it have to be an androgynous robot.
I figure it doesn't have to be an androgynous robot.
Well, it is if I'm custom requesting someone else to write porn for me. It'll be whatever I ask for.
If I kind of feel like we've already answered this third email, just sort of in the context of discussing the other two.
Okay, I will.
So send in your tips for helping Pyro deal with a blank screen. And Pyro, you've been charged to write a story about an androgynous robot fox giving someone a blowjob who may or may not have his pants off.
Okay.
I don't know if Pyro's going to want to listen to this podcast anymore.
Ever again. I think you just figuratively shot him now, and while he was still happy.
All right, go on.
So okay, on to the third
Which is
email
actually the
here.
first half of the third email.
Right. So this is from Dazzle. Sorry, Dazzle. I think I swallowed my own tongue when I said that just now. It starts off introductions, complimenting us on our decision to team up and please the masses, which that
Mm-hmm.
is what we do. So he explains that as a child, his mother homeschooled him, and so most of his book learning became TV learning stuff like History Channel, National Geographic, science and whatnot. I wonder if he's old enough that Mr. Wizard would have been something he watched. Um, well, he doesn't say. So he's basically homeschooled slash self-taught, um, and as a result, he never really got a proper grammar and spelling education. He says, "I've come a long way, but I've hit the wall for what reading can help me out with. My question is, what books do you recommend to help my grammar and spelling out? I've looked around and I've tried to find books on it, but all I ever find are books to help you with writing college papers and workplace writing."
And I think I already mentioned Strunk and White's Elements of Style. That is sort of the book to start with.
That is sort of the definitive style guide for English writing.
For spelling, dictionary.com.
Yeah, spelling, unfortunately, if English is the language you're working in, spelling is something that you just kind of have to learn almost by rote. There's not really a great way to know spelling rules based on pronunciation because English doesn't follow
No,
them.
but it does get back to one of the other things I say, which is um, read a lot. And don't read crap on the internet. Read actual published books that have been reviewed by an editor. And usually most of the things in the books will be spelled right. I've noticed in recent years a tendency to misspell simple things like mostly homonyms. Like people will spell roll as in um, it's my role to make sure nothing happens here, but they'll spell it like a bread roll, Roll, instead of Role. Um,
See, now I thought
but
you were gonna make it
usually,
like a more obscure like homonym like discrete and discrete, which
oh, I've seen that one too, and principle,
right, and capital.
um, and capital. But read books, read stuff that's been published and reviewed, and just this, get a sense of the words from the books you read.
And
And other than that, go to dictionary.com and look up the right spellings because
there's also a
they're all there.
site. It's something like Common English Mistakes, I think it's called, where it
Mm.
lists sort of things that even you know people who are nominally proficient with English still mess up from time to time, or like no, it's
We should put up a page. We should put up a page on the website with links to these writing resources. I'm sure there's a million and one writing resource pages on the internet, but for people listening specifically to this podcast, it couldn't hurt to have one more.
yeah. As for and just to touch a bit about how to actually like books to help with grammar, because Strunk and White doesn't really touch on actual English grammar so much it does on like formatting and style, and unfortunately, like grammar, that's another thing I think you're probably best going to pick up from reading and just seeing how other people form sentences, unless you really want to pick up like an elementary grammar textbook, which probably would be very fun. But I mean, if just saying,
Yeah.
looking at his email, his grammar isn't that bad. I mean, it's certainly more
No,
legible
it's
than
pretty good.
it's
I mean, there's just
way more legible than half the emails I get from people who read my stuff.
no, the grammar in the email is actually pretty good. It's there's commas missing
Right.
or misplaced a couple times, but heck, published authors do that all the time. So that's just a question of knowing sort of how sentences are structured, and I don't know
I
any
like
textbooks specifically that deal with that.
I like to play a little game I call Find the Comma Splice when reading books by, best-selling authors. Just because I'm easily
Why don't
amused.
you explain? Why don't you explain real quick what a comma splice is, and then we'll move on to the next part of the email.
So a comma splice is one of those things where once you know how to identify it, you'll never stop noticing them. Is when you put a comma in something that you're writing to form a pause, but you've actually written what should be two complete sentences. So it's a form of run-on. You've taken two distinct complete sentences and you've joined them together or spliced them together by putting a comma where you should have had a period.
Yep, and a semicolon usually works well in those cases, but a period works even better. And usually,
I abuse the hell out of the
oh
semicolon.
yeah, I know.
Shamelessly. I shamelessly abuse the semicolon.
There's
Every
a
time.
joke in there somewhere, but
That sounds like more like the
uh,
story, the kind of story Fuzzwolf would write.
yes. Except Fuzzwolf wouldn't be talking about the semicolon.
Oh my god, I
Um,
cannot believe you went there. And I can't believe my
it
follow up.
was only in honor of Fuzz.
I was almost going to say I left it wide open for you too, and then I realized that that would have just implied further wrongness.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave that. That was your gift, Fuzz, if you're listening. Um, yeah, basically, if you read your work out loud, anytime in the natural rhythm of talking that you pause, generally, if you put a comma in there, you're doing okay. Um, that's that's my 2 cents on commas. Um, so the email goes on. Every so often, I take on a commission, and when I do, it never settles right with me because I feel like I never get the freedom to do with the characters what I want. In the back of my head, there's this voice that goes, "You can't do that." So I guess my base question is, if someone pays me to write something because they like my work, should I do it like I would do it or like their character would do it? And I suppose I should read this as signed the Foat with Blue Eyes Dazzle. Foat is a fox goat, if you didn't know that. And I didn't. Um,
An androgynous robot fox goat.
I don't know if I want that given a blowjob. Um, Now that's a sentence you will rarely hear one of the two of us say. But yeah, I don't know how much either of us has actually taken commissions to write. Um,
I wrote a story once for someone as a gift for having been such a great reader with feedback and editing. And so I wrote a story for him, which is actually online. And if you look through my author's notes, you'll be able to tell which one it is. I won't call it out specifically here because it's kind of an older story and not the greatest example of my work.
and we did write.
But when I was.
No, I was going to say, and we did write stories with each other's characters. Although we didn't do that for money, just did that to tease the hell out of each other.
I do not need money to get screwed by a snow leopard. Um, but but no, to finish what I had started to say, before I posted it, um, I sent him like, "Hey, here's the story. Let me know what you think." And he said, "Oh yeah, like at this point, the character would probably be more assertive. Like he made him a little more wishy-washy than he should be." And he's like, "Oh, but for the most part, you got it right." And so, I mean, I gave him the ultimate character consistency check, and
Yeah, and I
really,
think.
I think the question here.
Go ahead.
Oh, go on.
No,
Okay,
I.
I think that
Damn Skype. You go. I'm just gonna shut up.
okay. And next time, I hopefully won't be reporting from an undisclosed, discrete location. Um,
That's discreet
this
with
comes to a
two
matter
E's.
of yes. Well, they both have two E's. It's just where they are.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So the matter of character consistency, it it almost doesn't matter if you're writing a story with someone else's characters or if you're writing a story with your own characters. You really need to take into account this is how the character would act, regardless of who's responsible for that character. Even if you're the one in charge of what goes on in the story, you can't just have your characters do whatever you want, if that makes any sense. And I think you know what I'm saying, Kyle.
Yeah, but I think his question is, he wants to write a story a certain way, and he thinks the characters would act in a certain way, but the person commissioning it is insisting that they do something else. And his question is, should I just do what they say, or should I follow my instincts? And I
Well,
think
they are
in
they are paying him.
yeah, I was going to say I think it depends on the situation. And I was actually having a conversation today in a different context, not about furry porn writing, but about consultant, where the person who's paying you, they're paying for a, a story, and in the end, they want that story to be what they want to see. And so, obviously, the kind of commission you want to take is the kind where the person says, "Well, I got these two characters. Here's the situation. You go write the story, and whatever you write, I'll be happy with." But if the person says, "Well, I got these two characters, and here's the setup, and oh, it's important that one of them wears this, you know, flaming red pantsuit, and they have to be, you know, blown in an elevator, and it doesn't matter if the character would actually do that," then either you got to say, "I don't want your money," or you got to say, "Okay," and write the story.
And if it's a matter of something simple and minor being wildly out of character for what's being asked for, then the person asking for it should probably provide you a better understanding of how those characters should act.
And I think it's permissible to go back to them and say, "Well, look, I think the story would go better with this or with this," and sort of give your feedback. But in the end, if they say, "Yeah, but I really love the image of whatever," then they're the customer.
Just don't mess up digitigrade and plantigrade.
Start wars like that.
That'll come to blows.
Blows. I get it. I see what you did there. Well, we're just about at our time, I think. I'll let Hirosaki-san curl back up in his undisclosed burrow.
Okay, so yeah, that pretty much covers what we've got for you folks for today. Um, Again, we're hoping to get this to be a regular thing, and unfortunately, real life has this one going out a little bit late. But we hope to get this out both more regularly and also with hopefully some more technical proficiency. We are still very new at this, and a lot of folks pointed out that the first you know, semi-official inaugural episode had a few audio issues, and yeah, no, we're aware of that, and we're getting help on smoothing those out so that the podcast will sound better and hopefully be full of better content in the future.
We've had some excellent suggestions from the Notcast's tech savvy at risk Panther. Thank him for that.
And he came to us unbidden even, so that was
Yeah, I
or
think
he came to me unbidden at least.
yeah. See, I think it was more of a case of I can't stand to hear this stuff out there in a podcast. Please fix it.
Well, fix it. We hopefully shall. But for tonight, we have discussed what we have online to discuss. you'll be able to email us for next week. We'll hopefully be recording at the very end of the coming weekend. And we will make sure that our contact information is in the show's notes and in the posting announcements so that you can get those uh, questions and bits of discussion fodder to us. And good night from me in my discreet, undisclosed location.
And good night from me.